thousands of times more comfortable than life on Earth. The heavenly planets are not pure, beloved, or free from the taint of material existence. The heavenly planets are also temporary, and therefore they are not the goal of life. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, has never anxiety. Consequently, for your own benefit and self-realization, you must worship the Lord with great devotion, as described in the revealed scriptures. Purport. As stated, Shine Punye Martya Lokam Vishanti. Even if one is promoted to the higher planetary systems by performing great sacrifices, which are accompanied by the sinful acts of sacrificing animals, the standard of happiness in Svargaloka is also not free of disturbances. A similar struggle for existence even for the King of Heaven, Indra. Thus, there is no practical benefit in promoting oneself to the heavenly planets. Indeed, from the heavenly planets, one must return to this earth after one has exhausted the results of his pious activities. In the Vedas, it is said, Tad yati ha karma jito loka shiyate evam udra. As the material positions we acquire here by hard vanquished in due course of time, one's residence in the heavenly vanquished. According to one's activities in different degrees, one obtains different standards of life, but none of them are permanent, and therefore they are all impure. Consequently, one should not endeavor to be promoted system, only to return to this earth or descend still lower to the hellish planets. To stop the cycle of going up and coming down, one must take to Krishna consciousness. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore said, Brahman te kodvaya manji guru the living entity is rotating in the cycle of birth and death. But if by the grace of Krishna one is fortunate enough to meet a guru, it is a clue to returning home back to Godhead. Having achieved self-realization, one takes to Krishna consciousness for self-realization.
41. A materialistic person acts for economic development, but again and again he is frustrated with material activities. The results one obtains are inevitably the opposite of those desires. Purport. He has ever achieved the results he desired from material activities. On the contrary, everyone has been frustrated again and again. Therefore, one must not waste his time in such material. Nationalists, economists, and other ambitious persons have tried individually or collectively, all been frustrated. For individual and collective economic development, but they have all failed. This is the nature, as clearly explained in the next verse. Text 42. Materialist desires to achieve happiness and diminish his distress, and therefore he acts accordingly. Actually, how as soon as one begins his activities for happiness, his conditions. Purport. I'll read that again. This is too good. Desires to achieve happiness and diminish it accordingly. Actually, however, one is happy, does not endeavor for happiness. happiness is conditioned. The soul is bound to the laws of material nature, as described in Bhagavad Gita. One is achieved a certain type of body given by material nature, according to the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ishvara Sarvabhutana Amayam Sarvabhutani Yatra Rudhani Mayaya Yatra Rudhani Mayaya. The Supreme Lord is everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul, is present in the heart, and as the living entity desires, the Lord gives him facilities with which to work according to his ambitions in different grades of bodies. The body is just like an instrument by which the living entity moves according to false desires for happiness, and thus suffers the pangs of birth, death, old age, and disease in different standards of life. Everyone begins his activities with some plan and ambition, but actually, from the beginning of one's plan to the end, one does not derive any happiness. On the contrary, as soon as one begins acting according to his plan, his life of distress immediately begins. Therefore, one should not be ambitious to dissipate the unhappy conditions of life, for one cannot do anything about them. Ahankara vibhudatma kartaham vandite. Although one is acting according to false ambitions, he thinks he can improve his material conditions by his activities. The Vedas enjoin that one should not or decrease distress, for this is futile. Not economic development. Yet the amount of happiness and distress for which he is destined, one cannot change this. It is better to use one's time for advancement in his spiritual life of Krishna. One should not waste his valuable life as a human being. It is better to utilize this life for developing Krishna consciousness without ambitions for so-called happiness. Text 43. A living entity desires comfort for his body and makes many plans for this purpose, but actually the body is the property of others. Indeed, the perishable body embraces the living entity and then leaves him aside. Purport. Everyone desires comfort for his body and tries to make a suitable situation for this purpose, forgetting that the body is meant to be eaten by dogs, jackals, or moths, and thus turned into useless stool, ashes, or earth. The living entity wastes his time on real possessions for the comfort of one body after another. Since the body itself is ultimately meant to become stool or earth, what is the meaning of the paraphernalia related to the body, such as wives, residences, wealth, children, relatives, servants, kings, friends, kingdoms, treasuries, and ministers? They are also temporary. What more can be said about this? Text 45. All this paraphernalia is very near and dear as long as the body exists. But as soon as the body is destroyed, all things related to the body are also finished. Therefore, actually, one has nothing to do with them. But because of ignorance, one accepts them as valuable. Compared to the ocean of eternal happiness, they are most insignificant. What is the use of such insignificant relationships for the eternal living being? Purport. Krishna consciousness, devotional service to Krishna, is the ocean of eternal bliss. In comparison, the so-called happiness of society, friendship, and love is simply useless and insignificant. One should therefore not be attached to temporary things. One should take to Krishna consciousness and become eternally happy.
My dear friends, O sons of the Asuras, humanity receives different types of bodies according to his previous fruitive activities. Thus he is seen to suffer with reference to his particular body in all conditions of life, beginning with his infusion into the womb. Please tell me, therefore, after full consideration, what is the living entity's actual interest in fruitive activities, which result in hardship and misery? Purport. Karmana daivani trena chantur dehopapattaye. The living entity receives a particular type of body according to his karma or fruitive activities. The material pleasure derived in the material world from one's particular body is based on sexual pleasure. The entire world is so only for sexual pleasure. To enjoy sexual pleasure and maintain the status quo of material life, one must work very hard, and because of such activities, one prepares himself another material body. Prahlad Maharaj places this matter to his friends, the Asuras, for their consideration. Asuras generally cannot understand that the objects for sexual pleasure, the so-called pleasure of 47. The living entity who has received his present body because of his past fruitive activity may end the results of his actions in this life, but this does not mean that he is liberated from bondage to material bodies. The living entity receives one type of body, and by performing actions with that body, he creates another. Thus he transmigrates from one body to another through repeated birth and death because of his gross ignorance. Purport. The living entity's evolution through different types of bodies is conducted automatically by the laws of nature in bodies other than those of human beings. In other words, by the laws of nature, prakrite kriyamanani, the living entity evolves from lower grades of life to the human form. Because of his developed consciousness, however, the human being must understand the constitutional position of the living entity and understand why he must accept a material body. This chance is given to him by nature, but if he nonetheless acts like an animal, what is the benefit of his human life? In this life, one must select the goal of life and act accordingly. Having received instructions from the spiritual master and the Shastra, one must be sufficiently intelligent. In the human form of life, one should not remain foolish and ignorant, but must inquire about his constitutional position. This is called the Tato Brahma Jignasa. The human psychology gives rise to many questions, which various philosophers have considered and answered with various types of philosophy based on mental concoction. This is not the way of liberation. The Vedics to solve the problems of life, one must accept a spiritual master. If one is actually serious in inquiring to material existence, one must approach a bona fide guru. Tadvi pranipatena pariprashena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha jnaninas tattvadarshinaha jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. Gita 4:34. One must approach a bona fide spiritual master by surrendering himself, pranipatena, and rendering service. An intelligent person must inquire from the spiritual master about the goal of life. A bona fide spiritual master can answer all such questions because he has seen the real truth. These we first consider gain and loss, and then we act. Similarly, an intelligent person must consider the entire process of material existence and then act intelligently, following the directions of the bona fide spirit. 48. The four principles of advancement in spiritual life Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha all depend on the disposition of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, my dear friends, follow in the footsteps of the devotees. Without desires, fully depend upon the disposition of the Lord. Worship the Super Soul in devotion. Worship Him, the Super Soul. Hare Krishna. Are you comfortable out there?
We don't mind. Whatever's easier for you, Krishna.
Well,
Yeah, chairs.
there's chairs inside here.
Try this one.
Yeah, right here. You're next to your uncle. Welcome to the Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
These are words of intelligence.
Purport. These are words of intelligence. Everyone should know that in every stage of life we are dependent upon the Supreme Personality of God. Therefore, the dharma, religion, which we accept, should be that which is recommended by Prahlad Maharaj. Bhagavatam. This is the instruction of Krishna. To take shelter of the lotus feet, the rules and regulations of Bhagavata Dharma, devotional service. As far as economic development is concerned, we should discharge our duties, but fully depend on the feet of the Lord for the results. Karmani padikaraste mahaleshu kadachana. You have a right to perform, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. According to one's position, one should perform his duties, but for the results, one should focus upon Krishna. Narottam Das Thakur sings that our only desire should be to perform the duties of Krishna. We should not be misled by the Mimamsa philosophy, which concludes that if we work some automatic, that is not a This is not upon the will of the Supreme Godhead. In service, therefore, the devotee upon the friend Krishna in devotional service. God in Hari, the super soul. Hari is the soul and the super soul of all living entities. Every living entity is a manifestation of the soul and the material body. The Lord is the most dear, and He is the supreme. Purport. Now that God is the material energy, the spiritual energy. In everyone's heart as the super soul. Although the living entity is the cause of various types of bodies. Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Vrishajunati Bhavaya Sutani Yadrikani Mayaya The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart. Are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. The body is just like a machine, a car. The entity is given a chance to sit and move according to his. The original cause of the material body and the soul, which is expanded by his margin. The Lord is the original cause of the material body and the soul, which is expanded by his marginal energy. The Supreme Lord is the dear of all living entities. Prahlad Maharaj therefore advised his class friends, the sons of the demons, to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead again. 50. Devo Suru Manusho Va. If a demigod, demon, human being, Yaksha, Gandharva, or anyone within this universe renders service to the lotus feet of Mukunda, who can deliver liberation, he is actually situated in the most auspicious condition of life. Headed by Prahlad Maharaj. That's really nice. Reminds me of the verse Bejari Unio Tagre from the first canto, second chapter. It just indicates souls, the Mahajans.
Yep.
That previously all the great, because he was beyond, they knew him to be beyond the three, provide the highest benefit. Anyone who follows in the footsteps is eligible for the same results. Similar kind of verse. If a demigod, demon, human, Dharma, or anyone within this universe renders service to the lotus feet of Mukunda, who can deliver liberation, he is actually in the most auspicious condition of life, exactly like us, the Mahajanas, headed by Prahlad Maharaj. Purport: Prahlad Maharaj, by his living age in devotional service, whether in demigod society, asura society, society, every living entity should take shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda and thus become perfect in good fortune. So there you go.
Except if you're living in paradise.
If you live in paradise, you're not alive anymore. It's a town in Northern California just burned down yesterday.
Oh.
It was named Paradise, but the whole town burned to the ground. It's right in his hometown.
It was only just up the road from where we.
City.
No.
The devotees wrote
The
a
forest fire?
poem called the Yugashtakam.
Text 51 and 52 to stop it, whatever it is going on. My dear friends, oh sons of the demon, oh sons of the demon, my dear friends, oh sons of the demons, you can be personality of Godhead by becoming perfect brahmanas, demigods, or by becoming perfectly good in etiquette or vast learning. None of these qualifications can awaken the pleasure of the Lord, nor by charity, austerity, sacrifice, cleanliness, or vows can one satisfy the Lord. The Lord is pleased only if one has unflinching, unalloyed devotion to Him. Without sincere devotional service, everything is simply a show. I mean, that's a classic verse.
Navritam na prabhujata, nadam na tapomeja, na shaucham na vratanisha, priyate maya bhaktya, hari anyat vilambanam.
My dear
My dear friends, O sons of the demons, you cannot please the Supreme Personality of Godhead by becoming brahmanas, demigods, or great saints, or by becoming perfectly good in etiquette. None of these qualifications can pleasure the Lord, nor by charity, austerity, sacrifice, cleanliness, or vows can one satisfy the Lord. The Lord is pleased only if one has unflinching, unalloyed devotion to Him. Everything is simply a show. Purport. Prahlad Maharaj, that one can become perfect by serving the Supreme Lord sincerely by all means. Material elevation to life, as a Brahmana, demigod, rishi, and so on, are not the causes for developing of Godhead. But if one sincerely engages in his Krishna consciousness is complete. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9:30.
Sudacharo Vajate Mamanayambhak Sadhureva Samantavya Samyak Vyavasito Hisaha Samyak Vyavasito Hisaha.
Even if one commits the most abominable actions, if he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated. To develop unalloyed devotion is the perfection of life. Other processes may be helpful, but if one does not develop his love for Krishna, these other processes are simply a way regard creation are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction of the Supreme Lord. The test of perfection is one's unalloyed devotion to the Lord.
My dear friends, O sons of demons, in the same favorable way that one sees himself and takes care of himself, take devotional service without becoming Krishna conscious. One therefore